Okay. Welcome everyone to Ask a Forester. This is our, it's an infrequent program, probably too infrequent program that we do with our land trust forester, the Maine Woodland Owners land trust forester, Harold Burnett. My name is Jen Hicks. I'm the director of outreach, events and outreach, and we're hitting a year mark, just over a year of doing these online programs, and we're so glad that everybody's here today. This is essentially a very relaxed, kind of car talk-ish program where people have come to bring with questions and want to know what Harold might think about certain things that they're dealing with on the woodlot. So this is a really informal, unstructured program where you literally will have a chance to ask your question either through chat. That's why I've asked you to open your chat box, because that's a great place to send your question, or you can turn on your video camera and you can raise your hand, and I'll be looking for you and seeing who's interested in asking a question. You can also just jump in. Right now we have a pretty small group. We actually had several people registered, so I'm hoping to see more show up, but since we have this small group, we can go ahead and be even more informal and just jump in with a question. So I've asked Harold to maybe kick us off today with a quick summary or overview of where we are with our organization. As many of you know, we have a land trust. That's why we have a land trust forester. We have over 11,000 acres of in-fee and conservation easement properties. And Harold is essentially in charge of making sure that they're all managed well. So it's a huge job. We don't have him full time, and yet he's still able to accomplish this, as well as receive new donations and inquiries about donations. So we're very lucky to have someone like Harold. He's got over 30 years of experience as a forester, working as a consulting forester on his in his own business. So he uses his expertise and his experience in the field to our benefit, and we are very grateful for it.
All right, enough flattery, Jen. We can get on.
Hey, you never know. I might own my own woodlot, and nice to know a forester. So, so Harold, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to pass it over to you, and also just so you know, if we get enough people where there's lots of questions and we run out of time because Harold's got to jump off, just before 5, he's available for questions that you may have after this event, and his email will send out to everybody after this program. I'll follow up with everybody on email with his address and any other information that might have been asked about during this program as follow-up. I think that's all. So Harold, I'm going to pass it on to you, and I will keep an eye out for questions and look for people's hands and make sure everybody gets what they need today.
Great. Well, thank you. Hello, everybody. Yeah, there's also, well, now I'll put you back on, Jen, a regular query of Maine Woodlands, if questions ever come up, whether you have my email address or not, which is through the website. So anyway.
You mean the contact at Maine
yes.
Woodland Owners? Yep. Or Jen at mainwoodlandowners.org. So any of us, and I do check the contact at email regularly.
And if those are appropriate questions for me, they'll get forwarded on to me. So anyway, so yeah, let me just do a very quick rundown on where we are with the land trust this winter. We had, once again, another very generous donor, the Tabors in Bucksport, another 50 some odd acres, really nice property with some oak and some pine on it. Anyway, so we're delighted with that. This winter has been focused on a number of harvests. We did a project down at Penobscot with the help of American Forest Management. And then more recently, we a couple of contractors that I work with regularly finished up their winter's work before the end of winter. And so we were able to move them on to a couple of different lots, both of which were unposted roads, which are always quite desirable, both on in China and then in Somerville. So a couple of small projects, but it was very nice to be able to get some talent onto some small sort of corners of lots that hadn't been either forgotten or they ran out of season from when they cut before. But anyway, so that was quite nice. We have one timber sale going right now, again on a non-posted road, back on the Chandler properties in New Gloucester. Bill Taylor is plugging along there. And I'm diving into management plans. We've got some federal cost share assistance on a number of projects. So I'm working on those. So, and I'll be laying out summer timber sales over the next couple of weeks and months as well. So anyway, yep, it's busy. And on top of that, we've got a big carbon project that we're just about to launch. And what I mean by launch is we're going to invite some carbon project developers to see if they might be interested in working with us. But anyway, so that's the quick rundown with as many folks as we've got. If you have a question, fire away. Either write it through the chat or unmute yourself and speak it.
I did want to, oh, go ahead, Chris, you're first.
Chris, are you unmuted?
Yeah, Chris Hayes, go right ahead. You can just jump in with, you can, yeah, you can vote.
How about now?
Yep, you got it. Yep.
All right. Harold, thanks for doing this today. Do you do anything to promote specific species? You mentioned that they have oak and pine on these woodlots. Do you do anything to change, like if you have a lot of aspen or beech, do you change any of that on any of these properties?
You can. I mean, there's to a degree. And it also depends on how aggressive you want to be. But what I typically think of in, so let's speak to aspen first. So it's a sun-loving species. And generally, if you've got any kind of overstory, and you go ahead and harvest, take your popple out, it is going to resprout. It comes up very vigorously from the roots, and it'll probably stick around for a few years. There's going to be some partial shade, but it really needs pretty full sunlight. So it ultimately, as I said, with any sort of shade, it's going to wither out. You know, aspen can, that's not a terribly difficult one to weed out, unless you've got nothing but aspen, in which case, if you cut it, you're going to open it all up and then they're going to resprout, and with no shade, they'll grow right back to where they were. On the other hand, grouse and the like that young aspen thicket. So there are some ancillary benefits or some other benefits aside from just growing trees that aspen might be. Beech is a little trickier. It's a shade-loving tree, or it does very well in the shade, and it too sprouts quite vigorously from the roots. Without some sort of fairly intensive management, the best we can hope for is to try to trend better than beech. And one of the better ways to try to do that is to harvest in the early summer. So the beech has just expended a huge amount of energy to relief, to bring all that energy from the roots, convert it into leaves so it can start photosynthesizing. So if you harvest then, you will at least have cut it at the point where its roots are the most depleted. And that gives advantage to some of the other possible seedlings or sprouts that may develop. It's not surefire at all, but as I said, you know, in a case like that, you're hoping to trend better. You know, but if you've got a little more energy and time and perhaps money, another thing to do is, I mean, so beech has a market problem and a bit of a health issue as well. So from a financial standpoint, the markets don't prize beech. On the other hand, wildlife really benefit from beech. As with acorns, the beech nuts are just really, really prized food for a huge host of birds and mammals and others. So, so beech is not entirely a bad thing. On the other hand, the health issue that confronts beech is this insect and fungal issue that is causing the bark to become pockmarked, growth to be reduced, and it's just not a healthy tree, and ultimately probably leads to mortality in a number of cases, premature mortality. But what I find is I generally can work with it. You know, if it gets to the point where I'm doing any sort of harvesting, I will want to favor those other trees. So I will cut the beech if it's crowding an oak tree or a pine tree, recognizing that I'll probably get some regeneration, but at the moment, my focus is on the overstory. So if I can get the overstory of more desirable species growing better, then I feel that that's a plus. But if you've got a stand that is dominated by beech, and again, you have some time and energy, then I think it's worth being a little more proactive. And in those cases, what I do first is try to release, I mean, generally within that sea of beech, there's something better as well. There might be some sugar maple, there might be some pine, there might be some oak. And if you've got your chainsaw or your little herbicide squirt bottle, then I would go after the beech that are competing with those better trees. So again, the goal is trending better. So if we can make sure those individual oaks and pines and sugar maples and yellow birches aren't being outcompeted by the beech, then we've got an advantage. But let me just stop there and see if I've hit on anything that you've been thinking about or seems appropriate for your place, Chris. Is that?
That's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
I appreciate that.
Yep. Anybody else?
Who's next? Well, let's see, I don't see anybody's getting their mute on. I was going to say, Harold, and I sent you this email, but I just thought it'd be interesting for people to know that we have a lot of people who use our lands in our land trust, and we keep them open for the public. And one thing that I think a lot of people aren't aware is that we don't maintain trails on our property. However, some of the property that we acquire have trails built. A lot of the donors who manage their land always had at least, or often had a nice hiking trail on there that they maintain. So we were gifted with a land and some, nice access. We have a property in Gray on Whitney Road that is a very popular place to hike. We know that people are there pretty much every day walking their dogs. And someone emailed us this week asking if we were doing things to keep people off of the property. We had had a harvest conducted last winter, and the harvest was a little messier. The results of it were a little messier than I would say we normally would have, but it was just how the logger chose to leave the property. And since trail building isn't a big part of our considerations when we're doing our land management or trail access, it looked like that we were, purposely cutting trees in a way that, or the slash was fallen in a way that was purposely cutting off trails. So I thought that was an interesting observation. It was someone who doesn't own land or woodlands and is very appreciative of having woods to walk through near her. But it is interesting when harvest time comes and neighbors wonder what's going on and what, is this good or bad? And I just thought it was an interesting perspective. And it's part of why, as a land trust, we try to offer, opportunity for people to ask questions like that. And, why does my land look like that? Or why does this land look like that after a harvest? And what were the purposes? So it's gotten me thinking a little bit about how we present or how we help people learn from our lands. And our hope is we will be having a program in June on the Whitney property for new woodland owners, actually, because it has such a great amount of learning about what land looks like after harvest, what were considered when harvest was done, and managing the property from post-harvest time. So I just thought I would throw that in there, Harold, if you wanted to add to that.
Sure. Well, to begin with, we try to respect how the properties are currently being used. But as Jen said, we make no qualms about we don't maintain trails. And in fact, generally the only trails that we allow are ones where there's formal maintenance agreements, and these are typically snowmobile trails. I was on the WAG property in Lisbon just earlier today, and there's an ATV club there that maintains one of the old roads that runs through there. But but the Whitney lot in Gray is a little unusual, and there's some history to it relating to our ownership, in that there had been trails developed and some interpretive signs developed quite a number of years ago. The signs have all withered in the weather, but the trails are still well used. There's a subdivision on one side, and there's a number of residences scattered around the perimeter of the property, and they use it a lot. Those trails, are very well used. But anyway, so prior to a timber sale, I send letters to all the abutters, and just let them know that, one, we flag the boundaries, and so if they have any question or concerns about what we think we own in relation to what they own, they need to let us know quickly so that we can hopefully resolve any questions about that. But we're also just letting them know that we're going to be there. So if they hear chainsaws or logging equipment, that don't freak out. They're on our land, and that's where they intend to stay. So we do try some outreach. Obviously, I assume that plenty of these people that walk on that property aren't direct abutters, so they never got the memo. But anyway, it's something that, in the case of formal trails, we definitely lay out the timber sale in such a way as to minimize the amount of debris that is left in the trails. Normally I would, well, in most of those cases where we're talking about, authorized trail use, it'll be right in the contract. Slash cannot be left in the trails. Whitney property is something different. It's very informal use. We're not intending to block people's access, but on the other hand, this is one of the reasons we don't go into trails for a big way, because they can become an impediment to management. And we understand that the neighbors are somewhat of a political entity that we need to be aware of. And, we don't want to be adversarial in any fashion. That's not our goal. I mean, we feel that we can actually be very good neighbors because there's land right next to them that's never going to be developed, that's free to be used, but we manage it for timber. So periodically there will be some change to the aesthetics and change to the structure of the woods. And, obviously we're not ashamed of that at all, but there are some impacts. Anyway, so, when these issues arise, we try to sit down with the folks and just sort of explain where we're at. And we certainly, as I said, we're hoping that they do feel invited. And, in terms of getting around the woodlot, that's still their right. They may have to step over a little more slash than they did before, but I wouldn't be surprised if some other neighbor went in there and did a little clearing of the,
Yeah.
I often see that on properties. I don't know who they are, but they like to walk on the property. So they come in after windstorms and keep some of these relatively unauthorized trails clear. But
But this is, also generates the conversation of do we get stewards for these properties to be the eyes? I mean, it's nice to get a message from someone saying, hey, I walked in this property, I saw this, I have some questions. My response is great. Thank you for being the eyes and ears of our property, because we can't get to them all. So I do have a question from Betty. Betty, would you like to ask it directly or do you want me to read the message? You can jump in here. You don't even have to turn your video on if you don't want to.
I will ask directly.
Good, great.
Hi,
hello.
Harold. So I have a woodlot here in Farmington, and it's in tree growth, and where a road was put, where we built a road to the back of the lot. In the past 2 years, I've been struggling with some outbreak of bittersweet. So it hasn't gotten very big. The first year, I think I sprayed it myself with Roundup. The second year, which was last year, I had somebody, I had a local landscaper come in with his crew, and they pulled out what they could. And I know that there's more. Who do I hire to do this? I mean, is it somebody who's licensed? Can I do it myself with Roundup? I know that there's a lot of controversy about that. What do you suggest I do?
Well, let me first explain to others who may not know what this issue relates to. So bittersweet is an invasive vine. And with many invasive species, there's a real attraction to them in many cases. I remember, my grandmother's, above her mantle was this gorgeous wreath that she had made out of bittersweet vines because it has these berries that are, and it's a vine and you can weave it. And so it's kind of cool, except it isn't, because it can also climb and strangle trees. There's some places down along the coast where it's just unbelievable thickets of this stuff, and it just takes over. So anyway, that's the issue that Betty's dealing with, and I'll admit right off the top that I'm not an herbicide specialist, but I work with a number of folks who are. What I have heard, however, is that, if you are going to, so the application of herbicide is generally legal in the state. You and I can apply it on our own lands without a license. But if we're going to contract with anybody, they need to have a license. So if you're talking with anybody and they bring up herbicide, make sure that they're a licensed applicator. That's what, so there's safety and technical expertise that they have that is going to be very important. The other little tidbit that I've heard is that there's different, so you as a landowner, perhaps wanting to apply it, there's a number of places that you can secure herbicide. What I gather is that some of the off-the-shelf stuff that comes in relatively small amounts, squirt bottles and the like, is not as strong as what an herbicide applicator would be using. And you can get higher strength herbicide from places like Tractor Supply, but you end up having to purchase probably considerably larger volume than you need. But that's what I've heard. Again, this is not coming from an expert, but just a few things that I picked up along the way that I'll keep repeating until somebody says they're wrong. Anyway, Betty? You're muted.
That was what I needed, because the fellow who said that he could spray it this spring, I'll have to ask him if he has a license.
Yeah.
So, and it really just spreads. It just is amazing how even if you pull it out by the roots, then it pops up over here, and I'm a little distressed about it.
It is something you have to be very persistent about. If you're going to focus on on trying to eliminate the invasives, it's not a one-shot deal. You need to go at it again and again and again. But you should also, before really charging into it, first decide what's the problem. Is there, and for some people, the mere presence of an invasive species is a problem. But others might say, well, why is it a problem? Well, if you're trying to grow young trees and you've got, bittersweet or honeysuckle, barberry, any of these that are choking out or competing with the young things, the young trees that you'd like to grow instead, okay, well then there you've got a problem. And but if you can keep the bittersweet in control, you may not be able to eradicate it, but once you've sort of done the heavy lifting and the big vines are dead, then you're dealing with probably much smaller sprouts, which you can, they're not as big of an issue, but and a little simpler to control, or monitor and treat. I won't say that you necessarily are able to eradicate it, but
pulling out as much of the roots as possible once they're starting to regrow.
Yep. And and it's important too, to be able to recognize them when they're even quite small, rather than allowing them to, some of us can only tell when it gets to become somewhat of a larger plant, but if you can recognize the bittersweet in particular when it's quite young, then because you're going, when you pull it from the roots, which I think is a very reasonable strategy, you're not going to get it all. And you're also going to likely stir the soil enough so there's seeds in the soil bank that will germinate and develop. So it is something that just needs to be keep on top of if you've, but as I said, eradicating might not be the superior goal. Controlling why it's a problem is a little easier. And I mean, the problem with bittersweets is that it is in part because it's a vine, you can't outgrow it. You know, some of the other ones that are just shrubs and don't get more than 5 or 6 feet tall. All right, well, then you can, you know, if you can get trees growing up above it, then they're less of a problem, or less of a detriment. But anyway, so.
Good. Thanks a lot.
Yep, very welcome.
Great. Who else has a question? Go, Chris. Great.
I will, so I'm new here, new to Maine Woodlands, so I have a ton of questions. So I don't want to dominate based on
Well,
my
you can see there's a little room
situation.
for you, so.
But we last winter we had a harvest started. I own a very small woodlot in Cumberland County. They got about 60% done before they were pushed out due to weather. And then the market sort of just tanked for doing a lot of the trees that they're pulling out from an initial harvest. So now I'm looking at 40% still the cut with a horrendous market. Is it unlikely that the logger is going to be coming back anytime soon, just based on that situation? And then do you ever run into the situation where you have a relatively small woodlot, just based on all the woodlots that you have? Do you see that it's tougher to harvest on some than others, just based on the marketability of the wood that they're pulling out of this?
Let's go to the last question first. Yes. It's not absolute, but I sort of have a number that, 20 acres of harvestable wood is close to the minimum. I mean, and that would be, and then it depends on the type of logging contractor that's working on the property, or you'd like to work on the property. A single man with a chainsaw and a cable skidder, 20 acres might take them, 5 or 6 weeks, something like that to finish. And so that's a reasonable amount of work for them. Whereas that same 20 acres, if you had a fully mechanized logging crew, they're going to be done with it in a week, 10 days, something like that. I mean, it goes very rapidly. So, and they have to be very cognizant of how much moving they do to secure work. And obviously the more mechanized crews are hoping that they can find larger woodlots so that they can be there for a while. Because the more equipment that you have, the higher the cost of moving from one job to another. So Chris, let me ask you a couple of questions about your specific situation. Were you working with a forester as well, or working directly with the logging contractor? No,
with a forester.
Okay. And then what were it's not unusual that, weather interferes. And, you know, it's not a bad thing that when weather got bad, they left.
Right.
If they stuck around, you'd have quite a different question, I'm sure. How to fix what was rutted up.
Right.
But on the other hand, it depends on what the conditions of the contract were. You know, presumably there was a contract to harvest the entire wood, or, you know, you knew the portion of the woodlot that was under contract.
Correct.
And so harvesting the complete contract would suggest that they need to come back and finish. And so let me find out some specifics about the timing of when were they there and when did they leave?
Probably beginning of February to the very start of March 2020.
Okay.
So last winter.
All right. All right. So the big news, so I was trying to find out what the market situation was. Let me ask you another, what kind of crew was it? What kind of equipment?
Small. So they had a forwarder and a logger and 2 guys. And that was it.
And they were felling trees with a chainsaw?
No, they had a no, I'm trying to think of.
But it was machine did the tree cutting.
Exactly.
Okay, a mobile machine. Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, Chris's timing, was legitimately a bad market. I mean, not when they were cutting. The markets were fine then. The markets went south in April. And the principal reason was because the pulp mill in Jay blew up. And I would not be surprised if that type of crew was sending most of their wood into the mill in Jay. And what the complications were many. One, the Jay mill is a huge mill. Certainly wood coming out of Cumberland County, almost all of it's going to end up in Jay for pulpwood. And so there went the market. And most contractors of the size that Chris is talking about, they work with one pulp mill generally. And so they were all in on the mill in Jay. So what happened after the mill blew up, they obviously stopped buying wood. And then so then the other mills, big surprise, dropped their prices. And the loggers were left to scramble a bit. And the other mills did offer contracts to a number of these folks that had been heavy suppliers into Jay, but at a, significantly lower rate than what they've been doing. And so in fact, yes, there was a market interruption and a market decline. However, we're now a year in on the pulp mill. The pulp mill is not coming back according to the owners. And so wood is going into, well, principally from Cumberland County. It would go either ultimately to the mill in Rumford or the mill in Skowhegan. So they're not impossibly far, but they're not all that close. So when we talk about markets, there's sort of 2 aspects of markets. There is, can you sell it? And then can you sell it for what price? And so the ability to sell it has improved. The prices, well, some are getting a little better pricing than others, but it's beginning to shake out a little bit, but anyway, so anyway, so it's not unreasonable that their complaint about I can't afford to pay what the contract suggested when they were cutting a year ago winter. That's very understandable. And again, the fact that it was a small woodlot to begin with, they cut a portion of it. There's still some left, or there's still some left to cut, but so what, where's the roadblock in your story? I mean, what's the forester saying? Are you in contact with the logger?
I do all my contact to the forester.
Okay.
And there's just no movement on it. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a roadblock by any sense. It's just a matter of, we're just looking to try and finish it off. But understanding the market conditions put a constraint on that. And it's not that big a deal. I think it's more of just about setting expectations to say when we think it would be something like, or just, you know what, really realistically, they're not going to come back until they do the next cut in 10 years. When
is there anything about,
try to have them,
is the property seasonally limited? I mean, could you, does it definitely require frozen ground? Could they do it in the drier portion of the summer?
part of it is wetlands, but it does really well for a winter cut. And that's primarily the only constraint to it, but not based on the land itself.
I mean, I don't mean to be argumentative, but I would say, hey, forester, you know, we got a deal here.
Yeah.
Let's see what we can do to get this resolved, because at the moment, I'm not a happy camper. I want to, you know, we contracted to harvest everything that we talked about, and it's incomplete. So please help me rectify that. And I mean, you say nothing's sort of happening. Is there still communication going back and forth or not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's not a dead end, and so it's just one of those ones where it's like, what do you push? What do you say? Other than we just have an unfinished job, what's the real impact to this? It's not.
Right.
There isn't much. It's just that.
And what was your rationale? What were the benefits that you were hoping to gain from the timber sale?
So it was part of a larger land management plan that we put together on it. And it was really just to promote better tree growth, increase wildlife habitat. So, yeah,
so
that was primarily it.
You have gotten some of that, but
right.
Yeah, I mean, everybody likes to get the full package. It didn't sound like you got quite everything. So anyway, I would just try to keep the lines of communication open, and, you know, to the extent that you can be the squeaky wheel. You know, there's always going to be projects that are probably more desirable than, you know, finishing up, but
right.
That was the deal that was made, was that you were going to do it. So, or they were going to do it for you. So, anyway.
And that's coming
appreciate the insight.
That's coming from a forester who gets a lot of squeaky wheels, I'm guessing.
No, the goal is to avoid keep them from becoming squeaky.
Yep. I have a question from Bruce. I hope I didn't cut off this completing of the question, but I do have a question from
No, you're good.
Bruce. Did we get all the answers for Chris?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Bruce, you want to ask your question?
Sure.
Hello, Bruce.
Anyway, my question, when you're using herbicide, and I guess I'd put pesticide in the same group, and you live in and around your lake, you know, you've got lakes or nice ponds on your woodlot, what do you recommend? Hopefully not to stop 2 feet short of the shoreline.
I would, as I said, I have to beg off on a lot of the details of herbicides and pesticides. But are you talking about doing this yourself, or are you talking to a contractor?
Well, I mean, either way, it's the use. I mean, my concern is the quality of the water and the health of the fisheries and whatever around
Right.
it. So,
I mean, well, if you're, is this something that you're considering putting on your own land, or is this something you're concerned about neighbors doing it?
Well, I mean, I have a good sized plot around a lake in Clifton, but I wouldn't use it personally, and so I guess I'm concerned what other people would do and what, you know, experts like yourself are recommending. I mean, there's obviously not a statewide guideline in terms of shoreline use of these things. And as you point out,
Well,
they're
I
not
believe
really
there is.
restricted in sales.
I do believe there is. And
Oh, okay.
if you talk with a licensed applicator, they should be able to tell you. I mean, I would just, you know, call somebody up and ask them, you know, go through the yellow pages kind of thing, if yellow pages even exist anymore. But, you know, go online and find out who's a local applicator and just ask. So sorry, I can't be a better help than that, but
no, that's fine. I just wondered if you or anyone else had, you know, an opinion and form.
yeah. Oh, I'm sure others do for sure.
Yeah, that would actually be a good topic, I think, of alternatives to pesticide. If I had actually a conversation with someone about that yesterday, that she was talking to someone about an alternative so that they didn't have to get a pesticide licensed person to do the application, and it would also be a little safer. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's more out there. Who else has got a question? Jump in.
Well, I see the question Jim's asking about, well, I'll paraphrase what I expect the question is. So presumably Jim's land is in tree growth, and there was a harvest recommended in the plan. And he's asking to what extent he's going to be held to that if he chooses not to harvest the recommended, as recommended in the plan, due to low timber prices. Well, to begin, I would say that you know, you can always amend a plan, and I don't mean that as a means of circumventing it, but that's the reality. If you can amend the plan, so if that means pushing it back a few years, but the other thing is, so some prices are low, and some prices and some products are doing fairly well right now. So there isn't a universal market that's good or bad. It depends on the products that you want to sell. So as I was just describing in relation to the pulp mill in Jay, you know, some products are a little more difficult to sell. pine pulpwood, for example. That was, the J mill was a prime market for pine pulpwood and for oak pulpwood. And the other mills take much less of it than Jay ever did. So there may, if we're going to do a pine, get into a young pine stand and try to thin it, and all you're generating is pine pulpwood, that's going to be a tough thing to sell. And I would have no problem whatsoever amending my management plan saying, I can't sell the pine pulpwood. I mean, what some folks have been doing is, in the case of pine pulpwood, for example, is if they have the benefit of working with a contractor who can chip the material, then it gets chipped and sold as biomass fuel. Again, so the availability is there to move the wood in some cases, but again, the price is lower because biomass typically is the lowest product on the that can be sold. But anyway, other things. Wait, so Jim, you're adding to this logger hot to cut pine timber. I want to wait a year more just about the property. Am I reading it right that the logger is the one that wants to cut? And you're suggesting to wait.
Yeah, like I want to wait till I've owned it over a year anyway.
Yeah, no, good.
And we're going to have to. The plan is, I believe the plan is up in 2022, so we'll need to revisit it anyway. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But anyway, and the current plan says to cut before then.
Yes.
And, okay, so a couple of things here. You're the new owner, and presumably.
Perhaps I should redo the plan now.
Well, that's certainly a way to do it. I mean, the tree growth rules require you to, within a year of acquiring the property, to tell the town whether you'd like to remain in tree growth or not.
Right. Well,
if you choose not to, you're going to be liable for a penalty.
Well, it's staying. It's in conservation.
Yeah.
easement, and
Yeah, no, I don't doubt that.
it's staying there.
Yeah, okay. So on the other hand, so you've got a year to do that. And within that year, you either update your management plan or you adopt the former owner's plan.
Okay.
But anyway, I would say in your case, it probably makes more sense to, since you're going to need to do it by next year anyway, to go ahead and update it, which is then going to be written to your objectives, not the former owners. Anyway, very reasonable. But anyway, pushing it back a year, things like that, I think is generally fine.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Unfortunately, Harold, it's
Yeah, I just saw that.
4:58. We got to kick you off because you have
Yep,
something else
yep.
you need to go to. But
Okay.
this was good. I feel like you got warmed up. We're just getting started. We could have gone another hour here.
Yeah. So, well,
Yeah.
we'll do it again, no doubt, as we've done before. So, all right.
Well,
I have
thank
to
you
run.
very much. And for
you.
everybody else, so sign off, Harold, and for everybody else, thank you for being here today. Not everybody got a chance to ask a question. Hopefully you'll feel comfortable enough to send an email our way and we'll get it to Harold. He'll respond. That's a service we offer to our members and to woodland owners in general. We want to be here for them and be able to answer those kinds of questions. So, and you also help us think about things that we need to convey and educate our community with. So Again, thank you. And please look at our calendar and our events page on our website that shows all the events we're doing in April. We look forward to seeing all of you there, and hopefully you have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.